Hi everyone, this is Professor Amanda DeSimone-Shabrack, and I am going to review the Access Workbench for Chapter 2. So first things first is when you begin working through this as a project, or to understand what you're going to need to do for your project, more to the point, that starts on page 101. But as you start reading through, it starts talking about the normalizing of data, which is something that you learned about during the chapter. And what it wants you to do is it wants you to go to this website here, pearsonhighered.com/cronky, and download the student file. So this is what the website looks like when you put in that email address, and you'll get this big long list of books that this particular author is part of. You want to actually come down to the bottom and scroll to the 8th edition and choose student data files. When you click on that, it'll download with all the different student data files as a zip file. And when you open it up, it says edition 8. And you want to go into the Microsoft Access databases. I'm sorry, that is correct. The databases. I thought maybe it was SQL, but we're not using SQL right now. And you're going to start with the WMCRM combined data. That's what they're asking you to take a look at today. So I actually have that already saved on my computer, so I'm going to go ahead and open that one. And when you do that, you can see that they have listed for you, according to the chapter, all the different contacts that these customers have already made. So instead of having you build all of this, they've gone ahead and done it for you, but they've done it for a particular reason. They want you to take a look and see how difficult it would be to combine some of this data or to normalize some of this data. So let me explain what I mean by that. But just so that you know, the next few pages just go through what I just did, which was just to download the file and then open it up. So you can pretty much skip to page 104, and then you can see the same information that I see here. Okay, so you can see what happens is they're asking us then to change the email address for Brian or Ben Griffey. If you look on page 106, they're asking us to change his email address from bengriffeysomewhere.com to bengriffeyelsewhere.com. And they asked us to do that for records 1 through 4. The problem is that there's actually 5 records for Ben Griffey in the system. So I went ahead and did that ahead of time for this video. So I did the first 4, but then there's a 5th one there. So now we have mismatched information. So we don't have the proper information for Ben Griffey in the system. So the reason that they explain that is because they want you to understand that there are ways to prevent that from happening. You can create essentially, a master list, a master file with all of your customer information, and then create relationships to other tables in order to normalize the data and make sure that information is only needed to be updated once in one area. So we're going to go through how to actually do that. All right, so working with multiple tables, it's saying that we could create a customer contact, which would have customer ID, last name, first name, address, city, state, zip, phone, fax, email address. Right now, it has date, time, and remarks, but combining all of that information is too much. So let's split it into 2 tables, customer, which has customer ID, which is our unique identifier or our primary key, last name, first name, address, city, state, zip, phone, fax, email address, and then contact ID, customer ID, which now becomes our foreign key, which I'll explain in just one second, contact date, contact type, and remarks. So you see that underlined are primary keys, right? And then customer ID is also repeated in this table, but it is italicized. And the reason for that is because it's a foreign key. So we're going to be borrowing the information from this table and putting it in here. So it lives here, but we're going to borrow that information here so that it's normalized, so that anytime we make updates to the customer information here, so if there's a change of address or phone number or email address as we just did, it will automatically be updated here because this field also is identified in this table. So we'll have a referential integrity constraint that says customer ID and contact must also exist in customer ID and customer, meaning that this one must match this one at all times. Okay, so we're going to go through and do that in just a moment. There are going to be some new data types that we're going to create when we do this. So we're going to create a new, like I said, a new table called contact. And then we're going to include also number, date, time, and long text, which are different data types than we've used so far. So I'm going to go ahead and close out this database because we're not going to be using this one. And I'm going to go into the one that we did last week. I'm actually not going to use this one because I'm trying to keep them separated for when I record these sessions. So I'm going to take this one and I'm going to copy it and I'm going to put it into chapter 2. So I'm going to copy it there. So now there should be a copy in here. Yes, there is. And I'm going to rename it chapter 2 just so that I can keep them separated. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and open that one. And remember, we always want to say enable content. All right, and customer, if we look at the customer design view, so far we have auto number and short text. That's all we've used as data types. So if you remember, we're going to go into create and table design, and we're going to create a new table. All right, so let's see, what does the book tell us to do? We're going to call this contact, and we're going to call it, our column names are contact ID, customer ID, contact date, contact type, and remarks. So I'm going to go ahead and create that really quickly, and I'll be right back. Okay, so the power of magic, here we go. I've got contact ID, customer ID, contact date, contact type, and remarks. So contact ID, again, is an auto number, and you see it's the primary key, so we're going to go ahead and highlight that and choose primary key. Now, customer ID is also a number. Now, realize I did not put in here auto number, but that's because customer ID is an auto number in the other table, in the customer table. So we don't want an auto number there because it's going to pre-populate with whatever that customer number is when we link these tables and make a relationship. We're not quite there yet. Let's hold our horses with that one. But we put in it that it's going to be a long integer. Now here it says foreign key. Like I said, this customer ID is going to reside in the customer table, but it's going to be borrowed by the contact ID table in the relationship model so that the information stays consistent, okay, and the information is normalized. Okay, then we've got contact date. Now, if you had just tried to type in date, that's what it says here in this field down here. If you tried to type in just date, it's going to spit it back at you and say, sorry, date can't be used as a field name because date is used as a data type. So you have to make sure that you're using a different word in front of here. So we put contact date and date and time. Now down here at the bottom, I made sure to put in anywhere where it said yes for required. Remember we learned that last time, but the format says short date. So if you drop down the format field here, you can choose the different types of formats, and I chose short date because that's what it told me to do. And then under contact type, again, it's short text with 10 field size also required, but the allowed types of values to enter in there are phone, fax, email, and meeting. And then remarks, there's nothing to put in for the description. It's just going to be whatever information that the person needs to put in when the person contacts us. Okay. So now we're going to go ahead and save our table, and we're going to call this contact. Whoops. There we go. Sorry about that. There we are. Okay, so now we've got two tables called contact and customer. All right, so as I said before, it says, date is reserved, is a reserved word, so that's why it wouldn't allow us to do that. So once that's all done, we've gone ahead and done our short date on page 110, so that's all set. So now we have to create a relationship. So how we do that, number one, is we want to close out both our tables, our objects here on the left, and then it tells us to create a relationship. We're going to go up here to database tools. Okay, so I think that's on the next page. Yes, it's on page 111. To create a relationship, we're going to click on the relationships tab, And when I do that, and I'm going to maximize this window here for you. Oh, it doesn't like me when I'm doing that. Let's try that again. Database tools, relationships. Oh, it closed out on me, so I'll just right click and say show table. If that ever happens, you just right click in the field. It'll bring it back up for you to say show table. And so we've got contact and customer. So I'm going to add both those tables here to the system. So now you've got all the different fields that are in both of them. All right, and then it says, okay, once we've added them in there, what we want to do is now to create a relationship between the two things. To do that, we're going to take, here's customer, we're going to switch places here. It tells us to switch places, so we'll do that. Very easy to do. They're saying the customer ID from this table should have a relationship with the customer ID in this table. Very simply, you're going to click on it, hold it down, drag it across, and put it over here. And what happens is this relationship box comes up and it says, okay, so you're saying that from this particular table, customer, your customer ID is going to have a relationship with the customer ID in this table. And we want to say enforce referential integrity. So we talked about that already. And the relationship is one-to-many. And I'll explain that in just a second. So I'm going to say, okay, and see what happens here. So now we've got this nice little line that comes up. And it says, for each customer, one customer, because each customer is unique, remember, we could have many records or many times that customer ID can be shown in contact, meaning that when a customer calls in or emails or has a meeting, there could be many records and it will have that same customer ID, but there's only one customer with that ID. See what I mean? Okay, so that's what that says on page 112, all right? So once we have done that, it says to close out the relationship window. So I've gone ahead and do that. It says, do you want to save the changes? Yes, I do. So that's all set. We've done all of that. That's what that one to end stands for on page 113, is that there's a new relationship. It's one to many. That's what that N stands for, one to many. It means numerous, one to numerous. Okay, all right, so now we're talking about resolving multi-value, multi-column problem in the customer table. So what that essentially means is that Ben Griffey called to say, in this example, that his staff has a new cell phone number, and the number does not replace the current phone number. So for Ben, he's got more than one phone number for them. So just like if you had more than one location, you would need more than one address field, we need more than one phone number field. So again, we're going to have to separate tables. We're going to have to create a whole new table for phone. Okay, so what we're going to do here, let me just go back for a second. It says, okay, as noted in the discussion for normal forms and normalization, the solution is a multi-value, multi-column problem to create a new table in 4NF, okay, to hold the multi-value data. Now, if you remember from reading on page 100, 4NF, you need to ask yourself, it's 4NF if the multi-value is determined by any multi-value dependency that's been moved into a separate table. So in other words, what it's saying is, are we taking this customer information with their phone number because they have more than one of those items? If the answer is yes, then we're in 4NF, okay? So we're going to go ahead and create that new table, but it says we're going to work with combined data from both tables. So we've got phone number, customer ID, and phone number. With a referential constraint, customer ID in phone number must exist in customer ID in customer. Okay. Note that in a 4NF table, the two columns together form a composite primary key. However, adding a column named phone type makes sense that we know what type of phone is being provided, okay? So this puts our new table into BCNF instead of 4NF, but still solves the problem. So they're saying, okay, so instead of being 4NF, now we're in BCNF, all right? Is the table in 3NF? Are there determinants also candidate keys, which is what happened here. We created candidate keys. If the answer is yes, then the table is now BCNF. Okay. Again, these are on page 99 to 100 if you need an overview of 1NF through all the way through 6NF, I believe, so that you understand how that works. All right, so I guess we're now going into BCNF instead. Phone number, customer ID, phone number, and phone type with a referential constraint that says customer ID in phone number must exist in customer ID in customer. So the customer ID that we already have established is going to be the same one that we use in customer, but now we're going to borrow it again for the phone number table. So we must remove the phone and fax number columns in customer because we don't want it to exist in both places. We only want it to exist in one table. And then we're going to share that information actually with both tables. All right. So what we come up with for our final schema, which is how we plan out what each one is going to have, what each table is going to have. Customer has customer ID, last name, first name, address, city, state, zip, and email address. So we're going to take out the phone and fax. So we'll do that at some point. Contact ID, customer ID, again, is italicized because it's the foreign key. It exists in another table and is being borrowed. Contact date, contact type, and remarks. And now phone number is also going to have customer ID, which is still a primary key in that one because it's going to uniquely identify the phone number. And then phone number will also be the primary key. But customer ID that was the primary key also here is borrowed from the customer table. I know that's a little confusing, but bear with me. And then phone type, okay? So we have two referential integrity constraints there. Customer ID and contact must exist in customer ID and customer. Customer ID and phone number must exist in customer ID and customer. So that was a lot to take in, but bear with me. I'm sure it will seem a little easier as we go along, okay? So we're going to create a new table. How do we do that? We go up to Create. We go to Table Design. Here is your field name. And we've got customer ID, phone number, and phone type that we're going to do. Okay, I'm going to pause for one moment while I fill this out, and then I'll be right back to give you some more information. Okay, so I've gone ahead and created the table. And now we are on page 116. This is going to be the data that we're going to be entering in eventually. But what we need to do first is we need to establish primary keys, okay? So we are creating now a composite primary key, which means that there's two primary keys for one table. And the reason is because your customer ID is a unique identifier and the phone number is a unique identifier, okay? So here is customer ID, it's primary key. Now if I were to try to just click on the next one down and choose primary key, it just moves the primary key. See what happens there? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight both of them and keep my control button down and click on primary key, and now you'll see they both have primary keys next to them. Okay? All right, so once we've done that, now we have to create a relationship like we just did with the other ones. Okay, before I do anything else though, what do I have to do? I forgot to name my table. We have to now change this to phone number. Remember, it's all capital letters, and if there's more than one word, instead of combining them, you use an underscore because it is the name of a table and not the actual field names. So now I have my table phone number all saved, all ready to go, and I'm going to close that out. I'm going to go back to database tools, and I'm going to go back to relationships, and I have relationships in here. And I can click on show table here, or like I did before, I can right click and say show table. And I want to add phone number in here. Did it do it? It did. Was hiding behind the other box. Okay, so there's phone number. And I'm going to move these guys over just so that we can see a little bit better. Okay, great. So what did we do last time? We took customer ID and we pulled it over here. so that we have a one-to-many relationship. So customer ID, phone number has customer ID. We want to enforce our referential integrity, and the relationship type is going to be one-to-many. So create, right? So for every one customer, there could be many phone numbers and phone types. That's what that says. Okay, so now that relationship is done. And do we want to save the changes? Yes, we do. So that's all set. And let's go back to our chapter, and it says, okay, let's add in some data for our phone numbers. So we have for customer 1, we have 206-456-2345. And again, I'm going to pause for a moment so I can add in all those phone numbers in. Okay, so there we go. So we've got everything in there. Now, what's the interesting thing here is, once again, we have customer 1, and then we skip to customer 3, because if you remember from the very first lesson, we removed customer number 2, so the auto number brought us to number 3. So when I was putting in the data, I skipped 2 because record number 2 or client number 2 no longer exists in the system. So we didn't need to put in their information. So that's all set. So what is our next task? Let's see. So now we're going to have to delete the phone and fax options under our customer table. Because remember, we had those already established. So we're going to right click on that and say Design View. We already had established in here phone and fax number, but those now exist under the phone number table, because we're going to type in whenever there's a new phone number or phone number for a new client, we're going to enter in the information under that table instead. So we're going to go ahead and right click here and just say delete rows. Yes, do you want to permanently delete this? Yes, I do. And same for fax. Delete rows, and that's all set. And we can just go ahead and save that. So that's all set. All right. Let's see if there's anything else. Let's close the customer table. Yes, we're going to do that. So that's all set. And that's pretty much it. That's as easy as this was for this lesson. I know that there was a lot of information about normal forms. I just encourage you to please go back and take a look at that on pages 99 and 100 on the normal forms. And then I always encourage you to seek out some additional information. So feel free to utilize things like YouTube or just even Googling information. There's quite a bit of great information out there. But if you have any questions in the meantime, please feel to contact either myself, Dr. Peterson, or Dr. Terrell. Thanks. Bye-bye.